Hey everybody, this is our 1967 Ford F-250 ramp truck. It is powered by something, and we don't know what that is. But today, we're going to find out. Possibly. I am going to do an ignition system refresh tune-up on the truck. It is something that I have not done yet, and frankly, it should have been done before I even made the trip. But I have been sent, because I bought it, a set of spark plug wires, spark plugs, and a cap and rotor for this truck. I purchased them for a 1967 Ford F-250 with a 352 FE V8. If we look under here, we will see all the rust fall down through the hood. We will see a Ford FE V8. How do we know it's a Ford FE V8? Well, there's actually some really obvious clues. The biggest of which is the head design. It's really unique to this engine. It shares part of the head with the intake manifold. Makes it super easy to identify an FE versus a big block Ford or even a Windsor or a Cleveland. And hopefully you can kind of see here what I mean. This is intake manifold, this is head, and you can see the valve cover itself covers both surfaces. The intake manifold bolts into the head halfway into the valve cover. Makes it pretty darn easy to identify even on this slightly poorly painted and slightly oil covered engine. That's a pretty good shot there. So we've done some basic things here. We've put obviously a new alternator on it. It's always super easy to tell shiny parts on something that's old and crusty. Somebody's been in here and put a hot coil on this thing. Somebody's gone through and put, tubular headers on it. And it previously had a Holley 760 carb on there. I don't remember exactly which one it was. But it was, a fairly big carb. We went ahead and replaced that carb earlier. And in doing so, discovered that this intake manifold is a 4-barrel, not the 2-barrel you would find in a truck motor. So that leads us to believe that this engine might not be original. But unfortunately, there's no way to know. You might think, Cone, just look up the casting numbers. Look up, a VIN number or something. Ford said, no. That would make things too easy. There is 0 identifying marks on a Ford FE to let you know if it's a 352, a 360, or a 390. I was told when I looked at this thing that it had a 390 in it. Anybody that's selling any Ford that has a Ford FE in it is also selling a truck that has a 390 in it, because there's no way to tell. Everybody's just going to assume it's the biggest one and the most desirable one possible. But this truck from the factory should have a 352 in it. So today we are going to actually find out what it is, sort of, via measuring the stroke of the engine. So obviously, like I said, I'm going to be doing plugs and wires and all that kind of good stuff. Well, in doing that, obviously, we're going to pull the plugs out of the thing. And when we do that, we're going to set the engine to top dead center and measure the distance from, a reasonable mating surface like the edge of the spark plug galley down to the piston. And then we're going to do the same on piston number 4. At top dead center, 1 should be all the way up. At top dead center, 4 should be all the way down. Those two should be easy to reference versus each other, so we measure that, and that will tell us if it has a 3.5-inch stroke, if it has a, I think, 3.75, or all the way up to a 4-inch in an FE. But you know what? This truck was owned by a drag racing team. They drag raced Fords. They had Fords around. Who knows what they put in this thing? I see a real common one is people take 360s or 390s out of Thunderbirds. And if you do that, you'll typically get the 4-barrel intake. It's also completely plausible that somebody just threw the 4-barrel intake on there as well on the regular 352. So let's get into it. Let's start to take things apart here and see what we got. So before we dive into it, let us take a look at our firing order with our cylinders that are obviously different sizes all around, as they typically are. So on a Ford FE, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That is not true of all V8s. Chevy does things differently. Chrysler does things differently. Who knows what other orientations there are. On a Ford, the distributor is in the front of the engine. Thank you, Ford. I've always been a Chevy person, but seriously, putting that thing on the front is way more logical. So on that distributor, you're going to have 8 different leads, and they are going to go in the firing order. 1, 5, 4, 2, 6, 3, 7, 8. That sounds different if you're into like small block Chevys and things like that. But in the reality, it's just because Ford decides to do bank numbering. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A small block Chevy is numbered differently than that. That doesn't matter. We need to know this so that we put everything back in the right place. We also need to know which is number 1 in the distributor. All right, so if we go ahead and pop this distributor cap off, I'm not even going to undo the wires just yet. You will see under there what looks to be a pretty darn new rotor. Now, I didn't know the status of any of this. It's just one of those things that I know people usually do when they go to sell something. They just go ahead and put a new rotor, put a new cap, and put new wires and new plugs in just to give it that nice, clean little tune-up to try and get the thing out the door. On it, the mark that this is number 1. So I can see that our engine is nowhere near number 1. And the way that we're going to identify top dead center is I'm going to rotate the engine by hand until the rotor is in the 1 position. And then at that point, if the timing mark on the crank shows top dead center, we're good. And if we can't see that mark on the crank because it's old, rusty, crusty, and disgusting, then we can simply observe. So basically we'd pull the number 1 spark plug, and it's pretty easy to tell if the piston is up or down. So onto that crank will go a 15/16 socket, and we'll put a breaker bar on that and start to turn over the engine. Somewhere around there should be approximately top dead center. I'm looking for marks on this crank. It's pretty grotty, so I'm not getting much. I do not see any kind of mark there. I'm going to give a benefit of the doubt and say that it's 180 out and rotate it again and see if we see a mark. Front or top, by the way. You guys can't really see the front of it, but yeah, there's nothing on the front either. Well, let me tell you, I've come back around and I'm not seeing much of anything. So I'm thinking it's either just so covered in rust that I can't see it. It's either that or it's just not there, or the pulley has spun a little bit and the mark is just off now. So we're going to have to decode this via piston movement. Now, luckily, this doesn't actually matter to us. We're not changing the timing on this right now. I'm just going to change the cap, the rotor, the plugs, the wires, put everything back together exactly how it was. So we're not going to change the timing. And the travel is going to be the same whether it's at exact top dead center or not. It just makes it easier to get this measurement. So let us commence pulling spark plug wires with number 1. Okay, that tells me all I need to know is that I don't think these plug wires were new. They may have done cap and rotor. I don't know that they did plug wires because they are rather brittle feeling. And then we will pull the plug as well. And now we just hope that none of these are cross-threaded into the heads. These are iron heads, so that'd be really embarrassing if you did that, but it happens. A lot of people have been encouraging me to ditch the Ford FE, but there's a lot about this engine I like. The serviceability of it is pretty great. Okay, so those, they got those fancy schmancy split forked thingamajiggers in there. It's a snaky snake. Pretty decent looking plug, actually. And I don't mean in quality of like the plug, I mean the quality of the burn. I had just been trying to crank the thing before, so It's not a perfect representation, but it's not awful. I wouldn't say it's new, though. I would say they've been in there a pretty good minute. The Splitfire. And I'm replacing that with a standard Motorcraft spark plug because it's Ford. And we're going to make sure that we got the same length and everything like that. And they do look pretty much identical. And they'll be good to go. So the question's still out there. Are we at top dead center or not? I don't know. We're going to put this dipstick down into there, and we got a piston that is right there at the top of the head. So if it were not at top dead center, it would be much further down. So let's see, how am I going to measure? I guess if we go into the spark plug hole at an approximate angle, and I kind of put my finger up against the head, I will make a mark. Hey, give me that back. And I will make a mark on the dipstick. And then I will remake that mark in permanent marker instead of dry erase. And that'll give us an approximate depth there. So let's do number 4 now. Ooh, that's a good noise. And I swear it's even like they angle these plugs to be easy to reach. My dad's going to be so upset that I'm complimenting a Ford. He's going to have to get over it. I think this socket is missing the thing that makes it a spark plug socket. It's supposed to have like a rubber grommet in there. Hey, now we're talking. Now it should take the plug with it. Yeah. And once again, looks fine. I don't know. Maybe you're a better plug reader than I. But it doesn't look hideously bad. Not covered in oil, that's encouraging. Super surprised by that this thing isn't apparently burning oil. It's not got leaky valve seals or whatever. Who knows the history of this engine? But now it is time, everybody. It is time to get our dipstick, to put it into number 4, to feel it go much lower than the other one did, to somehow reach back here and approximately match up where it was. Uh-oh. I got hung up. I wish you had a camera of how dumb I look doing that. What's it going to be? What's it going to be? What do you think? Put your comment below. Is it 352/360 or is it a 390? It is a stroke of 3.5 inches, which means that this engine is either a 352 or a 360. That is the same for every vehicle that you buy that says it has an FE and says it's a 390. Just go ahead and assume it's not. Am I heartbroken? Am I devastated right now? Absolutely not. It doesn't matter to me at all. I never really assumed that it had a 390 at all. The fact that it does have those tubular headers and the 4-barrel intake is nice, you know? And it runs great. It really, I don't feel like I need more power. I just need more gear. And if we can get this thing tuned up, running good, and you know, if it keeps running as strong as it is, I have no problems staying with the 352 or 360, whichever it is. How to tell those apart, you're going to have to go to a higher pay grade than me to find that out, but they're the same, essentially. That's what we got. So now I'm going to continue putting my new spark plugs on, my new spark plug wires, a new cap and rotor, and I'll be happy as I was before. And the mystery is over now. It is not a 390, and I am not at all surprised. All right, now 4, 5, and 6. And like I was saying, I'm really not devastated by the fact that it's not, a 390 or whatever. And I've really kind of taken a liking to this engine. It's somewhat attractive, which does matter, of course, in the world of engines. It really doesn't. But no, yeah, it's not a hideous looking engine, and it's a little bit different for sure. It's not what people think of when they think of Ford V8s. That people don't just go to the FE, they go to the Windsor, they go to the Cleveland, or they even might go to the next gen big blocks, the 460 or whatever. And although I'm sure they all have their merits, at the end of the day, this thing is, a ramp truck. It's not a muscle car. It's not supposed to be fast. It's not, heck, I don't want it to be fast. This thing's 9,000 pounds trying to get down the road. I don't want to be able to do 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. Yeah, 10 seconds. That's the goal. It's just got to be a truck. And having driven it as much as I have now, I really don't feel like power is a problem. It gets out of its own way. It doesn't really struggle on hills too much. So although many of you probably want me to go bigger or to go more modern, for now, I'm pretty content sticking with what we got. Alright, so I got all the plugs started by hand, as you should. And now we snug them down. I'm not going to go in here and do any crazy plug indexing or anything like that. These engines are so simple. If you can throw some spark at it, it's gonna do its job. Let's take this angry octopus out of here. See the coil as well. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get our new cap and rotor out, and we're going to make sure that everything looks the same, because you don't want to go in there and install new parts that aren't correct. This one is also stamped 1, thankfully. I am in no way, shape, or form sponsored by Rock Auto, but I would like to thank Rock Auto for continuing to carry parts for old cars. I get worried when I see them clearancing out old stuff, because I don't want them to stop. Please keep carrying stuff for old cars. New wires, I think they might even be the same brand. Standard Motor Products. Standard Motor Products. Hey, these worked, so those should work too. So this rotor, this cap, in very, very good shape. In fact, everything was in very, very good shape. None of this I'm doing is out of worry. It's out of caution. It's out of the very, very small price that I paid for all of this stuff will give me just that little bit of confidence that I didn't have before, and that's worth it. Plus, we got to measure the motor. All right, so out with the rotor, in with the rotor. And you see. So here's how this works. You got this point here that hits that middle point of the distributor cap. Let me make sure that's remotely in frame. It is. Then obviously you have your coil wire here essentially constantly powering this. And then as it sweeps by the points in the cap, it will ignite that particular cylinder. You replace these because electricity, metal, they all go together. They combine with moisture. They cause corrosion, causes misfires. You don't want that. I am going to keep all of these old parts because they're good. They are in very good shape, and down the road, if something should happen, we know we have good parts to fall back on. And then the cap will line up. Cap only goes in one place. 2 clips go in place, and that cap is installed with the rotor. All right, coil wire in place. So sometimes when you get plug wires, they are numbered per cylinder. In this case, they are not. So I've kept the old cap, rotor, and wires all connected so that I can go in and figure out who is who. And that would be number 8. How do we know? Because this is number 1 right here. And remember, our firing order is 1, 5, 4, 2, 6, 3, 7, 8. So 1, 5, 4, 2, 6, 3, 7, and 8. And that is our wire. And then we just do that all the way around till we're done. All right, so that is a job complete. We got ourselves a nice refreshed ignition system. Not really expecting anything different out of it. It should be exactly the same as it was before. None of these parts looked bad. And in fact, I went ahead and put all of those old parts back in a box with the cap and the rotor as well, and marked it as used. Good, Ford 352. Because, hey, we know that now. So yeah, if anything should happen in the future, we fry a spark plug wire on a header or whatever, we got spares on hand, which makes me basically my father, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and see that it still runs. I'm going to say that I have the confidence that I got the firing order right the first try. It's been sitting overnight. It's pretty cool. Will it actually fire up easily or not? I thought it was going to be like super easy. Not too bad. Hello, choke. Sounds so rowdy on the choke. All right, there's cold idle, running smooth. Sounds like I got the firing order right. Good to go. It's a good runner. I like it. All right, well, that about does it for our little project for the day. Nothing too dramatic, but, I was kind of curious about the engine thing, and ZK was very curious about the engine. So I'm glad to have a final answer on that, and we can move on to other things. Next up for the truck, we're going to start with the bodywork. I have received some paint stripper that apparently is easy to use and less toxic than usual. And I'm going to start with some wire wheeling of the rust channels, the body seams and all that stuff. And then, of course, we're going to get into cutting the bottom of the doors off and all that stuff. So next time you see the ramp truck, that's probably what we're going to be doing. There is, of course, still elephant in the room, and that is the transmission. And since we kind of solved one mystery today with the engine size thing, I think it's finally time to start to do some number crunching on the transmission thing. We've already done enough crunching with the transmission. Now, we've done a good little bit of research on what to do here. So if you're not familiar, this truck has an MP435 transmission. It is a 4-speed with a granny low. So it is essentially a 3-speed transmission. It's essentially a 2-speed transmission right now because third gear is all messed up. But it doesn't have an overdrive in it. And after last weekend, driving on the highway, trying to follow my brother with a boat at like 55 on the highway, never again. I don't ever want to drive a vehicle on the highway in the year 2020 that cannot do at least 65 miles an hour. With what we got, that's just not really doable. It would be at like 3,100 RPM, way too much for it to be sitting at constantly, and it's going to be guzzling fuel at that RPM. So we need to find an overdrive transmission for it. There's a few options. So option number 1 is to use the NV4500. It's a 5-speed manual from a Dodge V10 heavy-duty truck. It's a very specific one you have to find. It involves using like a Chevy clutch, and then a bell housing adapter, and then like a yoke adapter, a lot of little mismatched parts, but people have done it. It is not uncommon for people to do that. I got a friend up there. it is not uncommon to see people do that with the Ford FE. There's other options out there, and there are companies that specialize in basically keeping manual transmissions in vehicles like this. And one of them is American Powertrain. They are constantly, I see them in a lot of shows that I watch, they're very heavily into advertising the Save the Stick campaign. And you know me, I've been accused of being obsessed with a manual transmission, which is frankly true. And every vehicle I've ever owned has been manual, so it's a big deal to me to try to keep the truck manual. The easy route would be to go automatic. There's way more options. It'd be much easier and probably more affordable to do it. But I want to just see how much a kit to do a Ford-style TKO transmission for this truck would be, because American Powertrain lists the 1967 to 1979 Ford F100 Profab kit as an option, but they don't have a price for it. They only have like, ask for a quote. So I think today I'm finally going to put in the quote for this. You know, I have a feeling it's going to be way, way, way more than I could ever afford, and maybe they're even going to say, you know what, this probably isn't going to work for your application. I don't know, but it would pretty much be the dream, because the TKO 500 has a pretty high first gear, 327, and it has a 0.68 overdrive. Now the TKO 600 would be probably better because you can do a 0.82 overdrive, and the reason I would want that is because this is not going to be a very fast vehicle. Like I said, 65 is probably where I would want it to be, so it'd be a little happier. It wouldn't be lugging so much. But I think having the option of a 0.68 would be fantastic, and having 3 actual ratios, you know, before that would be amazing too. So these kits kind of include maybe not everything you need, but it would include a transmission, cross member, a mount, speedo adapter, the reverse lights and stuff like that. I think they will do like a custom yoke for you. Obviously we'd have to get the drive shaft changed, new pilot bearing. From what I could tell, this would use the factory clutch in the truck, which would be great because the clutch works absolutely fine in this truck. Even though it's a cable clutch, it's really not that heavy. It grabs great. It doesn't slip. It's fine. So I would have zero problems using the clutch that's in it. But what do you think? What number do you think? Because I have a feeling it's going to be a number that gives me heart pain. Oh boy. But there's only one way to find out. So I think it is time to finally get serious about that and take a look. But that'll do it for today. I'm happy that we solved one mystery. Hopefully we'll solve another mystery here with the with a reply from this company, and we'll keep trucking along. Thank you all for your support. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, actually, before I go, a little request, a little call for help. This is my wireless mic pack. It clips onto your belt with this chintzy piece of wire that you can see is not going to work for this kind of stuff. It just constantly falls off, and I'm worried about breaking it, so I've been having it in my pocket, which is also super uncomfortable. Do you know of a holster for this thing? It is 4.5 inches long, let's say 2 5/8 wide, and let's say 1.25 inches thick. If you scour the internet and you find a good looking like belt holster for this thing, that would be super helpful for me. So yeah, that'll do it for real this time. Bye.